Hello, welcome back to Refining Rhetoric. I'm your host, Robert Bortins. We have an exciting episode as we interview a Classical Conversations mom who recently ran for state senate down in Florida. And we hear from her how she's used the skills from Classical Conversations and made that part of her platform and reaching voters. And of course, we'll practice our 15 tools of learning together, wrap up with another segment on crypto. Let's jump in.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortins, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortins. Today, my guest is Regina Piazza. Regina is a U.S. Air Force veteran, a business owner, and homeschool mom with Classical Conversations. She recently ran for the Florida State Senate District 2, and after serving as a Classical Conversations support rep, Regina stepped away to focus on her campaign. She lives with her husband, Tom, and 3 children and a dog in beautiful Destin, Florida. Regina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So awesome and honoring to be here today.
Now, of course, we spoke before you decided to run, but what made you as a homeschool mom and parent and veteran decide to run for the Florida Senate, and what was really the story behind that decision?
Yeah, I always tell people the short answer is God. And though that sounds a little bit maybe trite and quick, the longer version of that was my family and I and 2 other CC homeschool families were at a Franklin Graham event in Panama City Beach in January of 2020. And Franklin Graham was giving the charge out to the audience. And that charge was, he said, this is going to be the most historical election in the history of the United States. And as we know, it absolutely was. And he said, as a result of that preparation, that as a Christian, we needed to either, and I kind of put it in Piazza terms, pray, play, or participate. So we need to either pray about running or campaigning in some way, pay, meaning contribute financially, or participate in that we needed to either participate ourselves or participate with someone who is going to run. Well, one of the parents on my right side, she literally punched me in my right arm and she said, "He's talking to you." Well, the other family on my left side did not know that the first person did that. She taps me on the shoulder and she said, "You're up, Regina." And that was the genesis of the call. And so because our family had moved here after retiring from the Air Force, we moved to Florida because we were called to start the Air Force's first, now called Intrepid Spirit Center, that cares for the active duty special operators with integrative medicine. That led us to not do anything during 2020 because my husband was standing up that brick and mortar facility. But we were starting to do due diligence. And in last year, 2021, while I was still a support representative, I started attending school board meetings, city council meetings, county commissioner meetings, just really begging God to show me what I was supposed to be running for. And I got to the place where I thought it was supposed to be House of Representatives. And then the fall of last year, just as I was rounding out my position as support representative here along the Emerald Coast, in my quiet time, the Lord just whispered, "Senator." And so I wrote it down in my journal and I closed it quickly and I didn't tell a soul because I figured, if you don't tell anyone, then you don't have to do it. So that was how we got started, and through a whole host of other very, very deep and profound orchestrations of God, not the least of which quickly was the death of 2 mothers within 11 days, December 26th of last year, and then January 8th of the other one, totally non-COVID related. They both passed away, and despite all of that, God was heavily pursuing me and my family to run for senator against an incumbent. who was also the wealthiest legislator in the state of Florida.
Yeah, wow.
So anyway, the last part of that is by mid-February, the Lord had given me the same dream twice in a row. And that was me standing in front of a sea of people. And it was horrific. It was wailing and gnashing of teeth as if I was looking into hell, honestly. And I told Tom, my husband, the second day again, and I told him, I said, you know what the Lord said? He says, what's that? I said, the Lord said, this is what the consequence of disobedience looks like. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, Tom sat up and just literally washed his hands, if you will, and said, that's it, Regina, you are running to be the senator for District 2. It's over. And off we went, never having run for anything.
So what, on your campaign website, you kind of had 4 pillars, 4 key issues: the Second Amendment, sustainable housing, abortion, and mental health. Like, how did you go about, picking those as your key issues for Florida?
Yeah, I chose those because of the people, the vision that the Lord had given me for the district, which comprises 7 counties in the Panhandle and is just over 500,000 people. That vision was to represent the needs of a unified and flourishing Senate District 2 that shares ideas, experiences, and talents in support of our God-given rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That being said, we early on started something called Plug In with Piazza, where I would travel to 3 days a week all over the 7 counties to have coffee and conversation with the constituents, with the citizens, because I didn't know what they needed. I have only lived here 4.5, almost 5 years. And so they are the ones who want to not just Second Amendment reform in the state of Florida, but they want the red flag law repealed. They want abortion not to be 15 weeks, but to be 0. They want sustainable, attainable, resilient housing. Because one of my counties, Walton County, is the fastest growing county in the entire United States. And so housing is absolutely at a premium. They want mental health stability for students and families and our warriors. We have approximately 11 military, installations, if you will. They're not really installations here just in this 7 county district. So we have the largest military base in the United States right here. So all of that is actually over an umbrella to every one of those issues. And what also undergirds those issues is education. I share often that the reason we have a lot of these issues, because they are civic issues, they are lowest magistrate issues, is because we have been stripped for 3 and 4 generations at this point of the skill of how to think. And instead, we've been on the conveyor belt of education for many, many, many years and being taught of what to think. And because of that, we have no civic virtue, we have no moral virtue. And every one of those issues, those 4 issues that the people say they want, are wholly rooted in education.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Now, you served as a support representative. Like, how did those skills translate into your run for state Senate in Florida?
Oh, I will say everything. It had everything to do with it. We have been a Classical Conversations homeschool family for 12 years. We started with our oldest when she was going into 5th grade. And then we've continued with our twins who are now 10. I have been both a foundations and essentials director. I have started 2 new communities. I have been a Challenge A director twice, a Challenge 3 director. And why is that all important? And those all helped establish a heart for the value of, quote, education, right? The purpose of education is to nourish our hearts and souls to Christ first and foremost. And so how do we do that is by learning how to be a master question asker together, to be an awe and wonder together. And so being a support representative was kind of a a quote natural step next, or and in addition to. So how all that relates to running to be a senator is everything, because without any of that, I know that I would not be able to have the skill to listen quickly and to be slow to speak. And I would not have the skill of how to be a master question asker when I didn't have the answers to everything. I had the privilege to ask questions of their question, right? I pulled a lot of Jesus moves, if you will. um, and and so also I think the compassion for people and hearing not just their stories, but hearing the depths of their hearts and their hopelessness and helplessness as a support representative and their absolute desperation to be great for themselves, for Christ, to be a great home educator, to be a great wife or a husband, was all, I say, a setup to running to be a senator, because all of those skills are absolutely necessary to serve and to love one more, the constituency, the people. So really, it's just to be representative or to be in any position of political authority, if you will, is really no different than being a director or to be a support representative. You have to trust that the Holy Spirit is at work. You have to trust the power of great questions, and you have to trust that the student, i.e. me, is able to learn.
Regina, I love that. And I agree. I mean, I think the skills that you're learning as a director and SR just translate into so many different areas. And of course, that's why so many of them, we love to hire them here at Classical Conversations, because of the skills that they've learned. And, homeschooling parents should definitely be encouraged to run for office and continue to expand those skills, because like you said, you've honed them over the years, and, the world definitely needs more Classical Conversations parents in leadership positions. Now, you came from a military family and you served in the U.S. Air Force. How did that experience prepare you for your future endeavors down the road? And, tell us a little bit about that.
It's fascinating, right? We said on the campaign trail, and I say we, meaning it was so grassroots. I don't think you could get any more grassroots than us. We ended up having to kindly excuse, is what I say, our campaign consultant 7 weeks before the primary. And why that's important is, and how that translates back to military is, my father was in the military, in the Army, whenever I was super, super young. So I don't really remember much of or any of that, honestly. But then fast forward to whenever I was in the Air Force, I was a plumber and heavy equipment operator in the Air Force. And so I was the only female in an all male unit. And so that all male unit was in San Antonio, most of whom were, civilian males. So the demographic makeup in that unit was really diverse and extraordinary. And so that fast forwards into the running, to build the courage and the strength and the bravery that it takes, one, to be a plumber and in that particular demographic, I would have never thought in a million years that God would ever use those skills for running to be senator many, many, many years later. But it has built a tenacity in my heart, a courage and a bravery, a relatability that was a complete setup, things that you just cannot write or anticipate.
Yeah, I love how things in our past that we may not have anticipated can come back and help us in the future. And that's a great reminder. I love how you talk about how you are a Christian conservative first, constitutionalist second, and a Republican third. And can you tell me why you chose this order in particular?
Well, it's everything, because going back to the vision, right? Where there's no vision, the people perish. And if we were going to be unified and flourishing, the only way that we are able to do that, not just as a nation or a county, but as people, we have to have a foundation that is built in truth and truth alone. And there's only one truth, and that truth is named Jesus Christ. And so as a Judeo-Christian conservative, that is the foundation for every decision that I make, and therefore, out of the overflow of that is a constitutionalist, because the framers of our nation were indeed rooted in truth as well. And therefore, the Republican Party is third. So I tell people all the time, and I was just thinking of this last night, that our allegiance cannot be held to a party, a political party. Our allegiance is to one and one alone. And those two, the first and the second, the biblical principles of who Christ is and why he is and why we are here, coupled with the Constitution, are what inform our decision making for everything. Not the Republican Party, not any party at all. And so there's great, great freedom in walking in those two in that order first, as opposed to being beholden to the ebb and flow of what's popular in the party today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I always say that Jesus is king is a very political statement. And as Christians, that's what we believe, and that's who our allegiance lies with. We see that with the disciples. We see that in the Old Testament. The Lord is who we follow, and not those whims of the modern ages. And I think we were seeing why that is so important with all the craziness in our culture today. So you talked about that spilling over. So how does your Christian faith influence or inform your view of how government should run?
Well, it's everything, right? When you think about just scripture of, render unto Caesar, right? What is Caesar's? And how Jesus actually answers that question is so instructive and transformative, right? Because we are called to have our king, exactly what you say. We are called to have our king be the King of Kings and not Caesar, not the government. That's not where our allegiance lies. The beauty of having the priority of Christian and then constitutionalist and then conservative Republican third is that that order of priority gives us the method by which we move forward. We give Caesar, i.e. the government, the money that is, quote, due to them, but everything else is subject to what scripture says and why God says what he says and how he says it. And therefore, we are called to be self-governed, therefore a lowest magistrate. So every decision on a political level needs to occur in me first, right? Think of Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the outer parts of the world. Lowest magistrate, right? Starts with me, then in the family, then to the city, county, and then outward from there. It is never intended for us to worship the government. It is intended for us to worship God first, the King, at the personal level, and then outwardly from there. So all of the, quote, politics, we are therefore the body politic, starts with us. And we give authority to the larger government.
That's great. And I think, if Christians live that out more, then we would maybe be in a better place, as opposed to thinking that the government gets to supersede God in certain situations. And I think you and I are on the same page that we always believe that the government's ultimate authority is to God, and Caesar ultimately bows down to God and not the other way around.
Yeah. But that goes back also to, Robert, real quick, the back to what we were saying a little while ago, that, we're 3 and 4, probably even more generations outside of biblical authority and moral underpinning. And therefore, all these other things are sacrificed. And so genuinely, as I've been out in these 7 counties, genuinely at the deepest heart of what I'm getting ready to say is with super love for the people. But We do not know because we genuinely do not know, and therefore we do not know how to behave or to act on anything anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely see that in some of the Republican policies that we're fighting against here at Classical Conversations. It's always like, this is not conservative. This is not Christian. You call yourself a Christian conservative.
Interestingly, that is part of the, kind of 1A, 1B that the people were talking about here in Florida. The interesting part is that abortion, since we are 15 weeks, which is, 3.5 months, people are like, okay, great, that's great. But you know what? It isn't, because, the state of Florida is obviously one of the most conservative in the United States, but we are number 3 in the killing of children. We killed 75,000 last year, and approximately 9 of those were for the horrific act of incest or rape. And that 15 weeks was passed by way of a majority Republican legislature, right? And so back to the Second Amendment and red flag law, also, that was put forth by the majority Republicans. And of the 20 that have red flag laws, to your point of the legislation and Republicans, there are 2 in the United States, 2 states that are Republican. The rest are Democrats. Now, how on earth did Florida get that to that place as a conservative, mostly majority Republican, is the question.
Yeah, the Second Amendment shall not be infringed. I don't know why people don't understand what that means. But anyways, we digress. You ran, you didn't quite make it out through the primary, but, you had a well-funded kind of big GOP machine-backed individual that did win. So what do you, what's your piece of advice or encouragement to our audience? And do they need to support anyone that maybe aligns with the same letter that they align with? Or what do you see going forward for conservative Christians in the 2022 election and in 2024 going forward?
Yeah, the main thing has to be the main thing, which was the main thing on our campaign, and that's prayer. Prayer and fasting, believe it or not, for every single tiny ounce of decision making. And so what does that look like going forward for all of us as Christians? Is we need to be praying about those 3 things that God was giving to us from Franklin Graham. How will you participate? How will you pray for? And how will you play? And the question therefore begs, will you? When God calls, because he will call you, will you? Are you willing to adhere to, and God kept me in 2 Chronicles 20 for all these months. Are you willing to not be afraid or dismayed, right? Are you willing to position yourself and stand still and see the salvation of the Lord who is with you, and believe that he will establish you, believe that he will prosper you? Will you sing? Will you praise in the midst of the calling, despite wanting to run as far and as fast as you possibly can? Will you believe that God is a provider? He is Jehovah Jireh. He foresees. He procures beforehand. Do we realize that? Do we believe it? Do we believe that he makes ready for future use and he prepares in advance? He prepares us in advance. And I say that because, to the point of the finances, yes, my opposition came in. The incumbent didn't even run. He retired the week before the final deadline, if you will, in June. He retired on a Monday night, and Tuesday morning, the heir apparent signed up. And that was on purpose. And so that heir apparent had already been in the legislature for 8 years as a young man. He had $1.5 million in his coffers through a political action committee. And I say all of this as an encouragement to believe when God says go, you take your position, put the rod in your back and go, because That's what we were up against. Our political consultant said, you're going to spend $300,000 to run this race. And the Lord said, no, you're not. It'll be under $100,000. And we spent $75,000 on this race. God provided at the quote last minute TV and videos and extra money for Facebook. It was extraordinary. I mentioned earlier, you can't write this stuff. You can't, because you can't even conceive of it. So trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all of your way, acknowledge him. He will make the path straight. And through all of that, you have to continue to want to be educated in the process and participate.
I often hear from families that, I'm not very political or I'm not interested in politics. And I always usually tell them that, well, politics is really interested in you. They're really interested in your children and they're really interested in your pocketbook. So how would you recommend families get involved if maybe they're, not trying to run and they're not trying to, maybe they're not able to, financially give a lot of money. So, what are ways for them to really impact the next leadership?
An easy start would be to get just a little pocket constitution and just read it periodically and just have a discussion between yourself and your family. Just easy, right? Familiarize yourself with source documents. That's the greatest one. The other two things that I saw over and over again is that you can participate is in your school board. If you're not running for school board, you must be at those meetings. Homeschool, charter, does not matter how you're educating. Get to the school board meetings, hold those people accountable. Every single incumbent that ran this year got reelected. And it was astonishing because there were brand new people in there. The back to what you were saying, the why on the politics wants you is the education is where politics and all of this starts. You've got to be involved in your school board. The other is your county commission meetings or your magistrate meetings or what have you. Go sit and hear and be a voice. Those usually occur once a month. That's easy to do. School board, county commission, all day. That's been my deepest heartache because there's no vision in those county commission meetings. Therefore, they're working willy-nilly and doing what they want to do, how they want to do it. And it's a bad deal. It's just a really, really bad deal.
Thankfully, the Lord is sovereign. And I want to thank you for coming on the show today. If our listeners want to learn more about you and work you're doing, is there a way for them to connect you on a website or social media?
Yeah, so our campaign website and social media is getting ready to be taken down. We're waiting for God to share with us what's next for the way ahead. So we're anticipating that there will be some changes with that. But personally, they're welcome to hop on my Facebook page, which is RL Piazza, or to call me personally, or to send me an email at regina.piazza5@gmail.com. And I will be happy to keep them abreast of where God is leading next.
Well, that's great. And I'm sure the Lord has wonderful things planned for you. And, if it's running again, we'll definitely be there to support you. So God bless and have a great day.
Thank you. You too. God bless you.
Well, Regina's been a friend of our family for a little while. And of course, we've known her through her work at Classical Conversations. And I was really excited to hear her using the 15 tools of learning as she developed her platform and fundraise and listened to the voters in her district. So I just want to point out a couple of those tools. The first, the 5 core habits of grammar and storytelling, which is the use of words specifically written or spoken to share knowledge. And she shared about going to Franklin Graham and hearing him speak and how that really tugged on her heart and through prayer to go ahead and run the race. In the 5 common topics of dialectic and testimony, which is discovering what others say, She based her platform on what the individuals in her district were talking about, where they were hurting or where they saw needs. And so I thought that was really cool that she used the testimony of the people that she wanted to serve to create her platform. And finally, in the 5 canons of rhetoric and style, which is the choosing of the best way to present the thoughts. And she decided to travel 3 days a week, have coffee, have events, sit down with the voters themselves, hear it from the horse's mouth, and really engage with those voters, with listening and asking questions. And so I think she did a wonderful job demonstrating the tools of learning that Classical Conversations gives you to run a race in a very highly competitive Florida district. Next, we'll practice these same 15 tools of learning with a current event. For current events this week, I want to talk about something that happened in October. At the end of October, the New York Supreme Court actually ruled that the New York City vaccine mandates for its employees were not properly enforced and not properly put into law. And so that they had to hire back all the employees that were fired, which I believe was around 2,000 of them, as well as pay them back all the back pay from being illegally let go by the city. And I thought that was just a great testament of standing strong on your principles. If you know something is right, and that those city people who were fired are now getting their day in court and they won. Of course, that wasn't guaranteed. But the judge had some different ideas, and they really go well with our tools of learning. So in our grammar stage, we talk about attending, which is differentiating the word from other known ideas. And the judge said, and I quote, "The vaccine mandate for city employees was not about safety and public health. It was about compliance. If it was about safety and public health, unvaccinated workers would have been placed on leave the moment the order was issued." And so there he was using the tool of attending to differentiate the word from other ideas. He also used definition, discovering what something is. And he said the court found that, quote, "Being vaccinated does not prevent an individual from contacting or transmitting COVID-19, end quote. And adding that the vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals now have the same quarantine and isolation guidelines issued by the CDC for preventions. And then in delivery, of course, as a judge, you're going to rule in a ruling. And in it, he concluded, this is the first paragraph that I'm reading from in the conclusion. "It is clear that the health commissioner has the authority to issue public health mandates. No one is refuting that authority. However, the health commissioner cannot create a new condition of employment for city employees. The health commissioner cannot prohibit an employee from reporting to work, and the health commissioner cannot terminate employees. The mayor cannot exempt certain employees from these orders, and Executive Order number 62 renders all of these vaccine mandates arbitrary and capricious." And so, those individuals who stood up for their bodily autonomy and their right to make medical decisions for themselves ultimately won out in this decision. And I'm also reminded, I know you've probably seen that cartoon where you've got kind of a leader barking at people, but he's over a cliff, kind of standing on a balancing log. And there's all these people standing on the log so he doesn't fall down. Whereas if they would just get off, the leader would lose his position. And I think it's so important when we see tyranny rear its ugly head that we stand strong from the beginning so that they don't take over. And I just want to applaud those in New York City who stood up for their bodily autonomy, as well as these judges who looked at what the law actually says and what powers bureaucrats have and put them in their place. So just a great win for freedom. Now let's interrupt this episode with an important message for you about Homeschool Freedom Action Center. It's no secret that homeschool freedoms are constantly endangered by state and federal legislation, whether limiting the ability to meet in a homeschool community at a local facility or restricting religious freedom of speech. These laws can affect thousands or tens of thousands of families. Here at Classical Conversations, we are committed to preserving that freedom among homeschool families and local communities, so we've created the Homeschool Freedom Action Center. The Homeschool Freedom Action Center is a website where you can learn about threats to homeschool freedoms and take action to defend them. We can't do this alone. We need your help. Each homeschool family that stands to protect their freedoms is making a difference, not just here in the United States, but around the world. Often legislative decisions are persuaded by personal testimonies from people just like you. So visit homeschoolactionfreedom.com to take the first step into protecting homeschool freedoms, because your voice is needed to be heard, and together we can make a difference. So check out homeschoolfreedomactioncenter.com.
Welcome everyone to Classical Crypto with Will. As we've discussed, cryptocurrencies have been on the scene now for well over a decade, but until recently, it's been such a small industry that taxation standards have been very low, ambiguous, or frankly non-existent. So today I want to give you some insight into crypto regulation. This is a question I get asked about a lot, like how do I deal with taxes with my cryptos? So hopefully today I can give you some insight into that. With the recent bull market that took place in the second half of 2020 into the first half of 2021, the crypto market peaked at around $3 trillion. And this event showed, I'd say, probably greater public awareness, acceptance, and use of cryptos. In research published in November 2021 by Pew Research, 16% of their respondents said that they personally invest in cryptos. They traded or otherwise use cryptos on some level. Newsweek magazine, they cited a survey in January 2022 by the crypto firm, the New York Digital Investment Group. They estimate that around 46 million Americans, that's 14% of our population, own cryptos. That's a huge amount. So I think that combined, general sentiment, some of those numbers combined with that last bull market, all these events and statistics are starting to raise eyebrows. And now on a federal level, there's a lot of talk and now finally some clarity on cryptocurrency regulations and how it should be taxed. And I must say that it's somewhat helpful. So what is the cryptocurrency tax rate? Well, let's dig into it. Depending on your specific circumstances, cryptocurrency can be taxed as a long-term capital gain, a short-term capital gain, or ordinary income. Let's start with that ordinary income tax. So if you earn cryptocurrency, whether through your job or mining, staking, airdrops, what have you, you'll recognize ordinary income subject to the income tax. This can range from 10% to 37%, depending on your income level. At the moment, it doesn't go above 37%, which is great. Another crucial term is a cryptocurrency taxable event. Examples of taxable events for crypto would include selling crypto, trading your crypto or converting it into another cryptocurrency, or making any kind of purchase with crypto. This leads to either a long-term capital gain or a short-term capital gain. A long-term capital gain tax is what you'll have to pay if you hold crypto for more than a year. Your taxable event would be subject to this long-term capital gains tax, which ranges from 0 to 20%, depending on your income level. Now, short-term capital gain tax, if you've held your cryptocurrencies for less than a year, your taxable event would be subject to short-term capital gains tax. For tax purposes, this is treated the same as ordinary income and it ranges from that 10 to 37%, depending on your income level. In the current landscape, this method of taxation is essentially how regular stocks and bonds are taxed, so most people pick up on this pretty quickly. And then finally, let's talk about crypto losses. Crypto is an interesting industry because it's so cyclical. Folks usually earn a ton of crypto and income over a year, or they tend to have a significant loss and lose a lot depending on the year and the Bitcoin halving cycles. So you really need to learn about those. But a frustrating regulation that's in place by the IRS right now is that they'll only recognize up to $3,000 in a crypto loss over the course of a fiscal year. So let's say you invested $20,000 in crypto. It was a bad year, you lost $10,000. You don't get that full $10,000 loss against your taxes. You would only get $3,000 against your taxes, which I don't think is fair, but I'm not the IRS. you can the following year report another $3,000 loss, and then another $3,000 loss, and then a $1,000 loss to make up that full $10,000. So you can spread out that loss over time, but you can't realize that full loss over $3,000 for the next tax year. So anyways, hopefully this wasn't too boring today. Very important topic that I hope is helpful to you.
All right. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you are encouraged with our interview with Regina, and you were encouraged by the fact that these 15 tools of learning that we practice here every week, or soon to be every week together, is something that really is used throughout your life in whatever you do. Regina did a great way of demonstrating that. So if you love this episode, be sure to share it with a friend and tune in next time.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortins. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.